One of the write-ups in the newspapers about my father after his passing was they remembered a time when someone asked, what did Auburn mean to my father? And he said, it doesn't mean anything. Auburn means everything to me. And he really, really meant that. Right after graduation, he moved to Florida, one of the largest companies in the state at that time. Cone Brothers in Tampa hired him as a superintendent over their paving and their asphalt plant operations. But in 1962, my grandfather, who had started his own business by then, it was a small construction company, and my dad being an only child, my grandfather said, you either decide to come back and work with me or I'm going to probably retire and sell the business. He started working with my grandfather and they grew the business. My father and Fob James were good friends from high school. After he was elected governor, he called my father one day and said, hey, I've got all these appointments to make, and one of them's a board of trustee member at Auburn. Do you want to serve? It's from your area. And so my father said, sure, I want to help Auburn any way I can. And he served from 79 to 1993, which was a relief to my brother and I because we were running the company and he was off more. But I do remember the day his term ran out. My brother called me and said, hey, you know what today is? MB's last day on the board. And I said, yep. This is the first time we're ever going to work with him full time, so we better be prepared. My father and Mr. Lauder were very close on the board. They fought a lot of fights together. They were very instrumental in moving the Iron Bow from Birmingham, where we played every year, down to Auburn, and it was quite a fight. I do remember being here the day of the first Iron Bowl in Auburn in 1989. There were so many people here. It was just you couldn't walk around. And I remember passing a man from my hometown, Gadsden, who was a huge Alabama fan. He said, this is the most magnificent thing I've ever seen in a college football game. I don't know why anybody would be opposed to it. He also was very involved with the National Asphalt Pavement Association. At that time, there was no center for research for asphalt in the country, actually in the world. And there was a move from the National Asphalt Pavement Association to try to form one. Well, my father being on the Auburn board and a big advocate of our engineering school, he worked very hard to get that moved here, which has been a fantastic sort of a crown jewel for Auburn. There's about $13 million of research done through the NCAT Center every year. And it was a hard fight because there were many, many schools across the country, much bigger than Auburn, that wanted that center at their schools. So he really liked to fight for things and to win a battle. He and my mother provided funds for the Mike and Jay McCartney Brick Plaza, which was on the south side of the stadium. And for many, many years, I was told by so many friends, that was a place they took pictures, family pictures. Auburn football and athletics was extremely important to him. He supported the athletics program financially, emotionally. I don't think when he was on the board of trustees, I don't think he ever missed a ball game. People usually rank things in their lives about what's most important, God, family, business, whatever. Dad's was, God, family, business, and Auburn, and depending on what day of the week it was, is who's in which order. And Auburn, trust me, was always in the top because he just felt Auburn made him the man he was. My father receiving the Lifetime Achievement Award would be the culmination of his life, I would think. He would have loved to have been here on the night of the award. I'm not sure he could have held up emotionally because he was a tough guy. He was raised in tough times. He had a little bit of Irish blood in him, and he'd get emotional at times, which would really surprise a lot of folks. He never expected anything in return for what he did for Auburn. He always did what he did as a payback to Auburn for what it did for him and our family.
Please join me again in welcoming to the stage Tim McCartney, accepting the award on behalf of his father, Mike.
Well, good evening. I am Tim McCartney, son of Lifetime Achievement Award recipient Michael Bailey McCartney. I'm here tonight with other family members to celebrate this presentation of the award to our father and grandfather. So first, I want to thank the Auburn Alumni Association for hosting this annual ceremony to recognize Auburn family members that have lived their lives for the betterment of Auburn University. This is truly a magnificent honor for the recipients and their families. The Alumni Association team puts forth a tremendous effort to make this night very special. Thank you for your hard work and dedication. I think they deserve a round of applause for all the hard work. I also want to congratulate all the other recipients and their families, Mr. Louder, Mr. McCrary, and Mr. Walters. All of you are very deserving of this prestigious award. I stand in awe of all of what you have accomplished during your lifetimes to make Auburn University the great university it is today. Y'all set the bar very high for those that follow in your footsteps, so thank you very much. Michael Bailey McCartney. His children called him Dad. His grandchildren and great-grandchildren called him Pawpaw. His friends called him Mike or MB. He passed away last year on July 25th before learning of being named a Lifetime Achievement Award recipient. But were he alive today, I assure you that he'd be very honored and humbled. He would be especially tickled by the fact that he receives this award the same night that Mr. Louder receives his. The two of them served overlapping terms on the Auburn Board of Trustees, and they fought many battles together for the betterment of this university. So what kind of person was Mike McCartney? Well, like most of us, he was a lot of things. He was an Auburn man through and through. I don't believe there was a day that passed when he wasn't thinking of Auburn University and how he could help improve it. He's also a very private man. He didn't easily share information with others. He believed that 3 people can keep a secret if 2 of them are dead. Trust me, he did. However, the one aspect of his life that he shared openly without pause was that he was an Auburn man. I believe that outside of marrying my mother, Jane, being a civil engineering graduate of the Alabama Polytechnic Institute, Auburn University as we know it today, was his proudest accomplishment. Now, I'll give you one example of his reluctance to share information. Back around 1990, the Board of Trustees was in search of a new president to succeed retiring President Dr. Jim Martin. I was driving into work one morning listening to the local radio station. That was back before, XM and Sirius Radio were out there, so we were listening to local news. The news announcer stated that the Auburn Board of Trustees had determined who would be their next president. So not long after I arrived at the office, Dad walked in and closed the door very surreptitiously. And he looked at me with a serious look and said, "Can you keep a secret?" Yeah. He made me promise not to tell anybody about what he was about to tell me. So I promised him that I would keep my mouth shut, but before he could tell me his secret, I asked him if Dr. William Muse was going to be the next president at Auburn. Well, his face just went totally ashen. He was shocked. He said, "How do you know that?" he said. So I told him I heard it on the local radio station. He just didn't respond, and he turned and walked out of my office. So if he was your friend, he stood by you through thick and thin, and sometimes to his own detriment. But if he were your opponent, he would fight you tooth and nail until the battle was over. But he had an amazing ability to forgive and forget and move on to the next battle. He always acted in what he thought was the best interest of Auburn University. He treated anything dealing with Auburn University as a family matter. What went on at Auburn was an internal issue and no one else's business. Someone at Auburn once told me that during Dad's whole time on the Board of Trustees, a total of 14 years, He only issued one official statement to the news media. Several years later, after he was no longer a trustee, I asked him why. His answer was that he felt an obligation to the Auburn family, not the press. He was concerned that the press would not necessarily act in the best interest of Auburn University. He had no desire to get his name in the paper or opinion published in the paper. Can you imagine that today in our world of instantaneous tweets, chats, and TikToks? On the day of the ribbon cutting of the Mike and Jane McCartney Brick Plaza, located at the south end of Jordan-Hare Stadium, someone asked Dad what Auburn meant to him. And his response was, "Auburn doesn't mean anything to me. It means everything." That was Mike McCartney. So I want to thank you once again for this recognition of my father. Our family is profoundly grateful. Thanks.